Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered why time seems to have forgotten your face? They will tell you it's genetics. They will tell you it's luck, or good skincare, or clean living. But the old monks who sat in silence for 40 years knew something different. They knew that the body is not separate from the spirit, that a face is not just skin over bone. It is a record of everything a soul has carried, or refused to carry. If you have ever appeared younger than your years, it is not an accident. It is a message, and by the end of this, you will understand exactly what that message is, and how to keep receiving it, for the rest of your life. 1. The weight you don't carry shows on your face. Come, sit with me for a moment. I want to ask you something before we begin, and I want you to answer it honestly, even if only inside your own heart. When was the last time you looked at someone, a stranger, a friend, an elder, and felt, without knowing why, that they carried something heavy? You didn't need them to speak. You didn't need a single word. Something in the eyes told you. Something in the way the shoulders sat. Something in the stillness, or the tension, of the face. This is not imagination. This is not superstition. This is one of the oldest truths that the human body understands, even when the human mind forgets it. The face is not a mask. The face is a mirror, and what it reflects is not simply age. It reflects weight. The weight of what we carry inside, day after day, year after year, without ever setting it down. I have watched many faces in my life. I have sat across from men who were only 40 years old, yet their eyes looked as though they had lived 100 lifetimes of exhaustion. And I have sat across from those who were 70, 80, and yet something in them remained untouched, unhurried, almost luminous. What was the difference between them? It was not their diet. It was not their sleep, though sleep matters. It was not even their genetics, though genetics plays its part. The difference was this. One of them had learned, somewhere along the way, how to release, and the other had not. Think for a moment about what you are carrying right now. Not your bags, not your responsibilities on paper. I mean the invisible weight, the resentment towards someone who hurt you years ago, the guilt over a decision you cannot undo, the fear you have never spoken aloud, not even to yourself. These things do not simply disappear because we ignore them. They settle. They take up residence. And the body, which is far wiser and far more honest than the mind, begins to hold them. You may know this feeling already. Perhaps you have said, "I feel older than I am." Or perhaps you have looked in the mirror during a difficult season of your life and not recognized the person staring back. This is not weakness. This is the body speaking a language older than words, telling you, gently but persistently, that something inside needs to be released. But here is the part that most people never learn, and it is the part I most want you to understand today. The reverse is also true. Just as unresolved weight ages the face, unburdening it restores something in the face that we often mistake for simple genetics or luck. When a person makes peace, real peace, not performed peace, with their past, their pain, their unspoken fears, something visibly softens in them. The jaw unclenches, the eyes brighten, not because of sleep, but because there is less to hide. The whole presence of a person changes, and strangers begin to say things like, "There is something about you," without ever being able to name what it is. What they are noticing, without knowing it, is a person who has stopped carrying what was never theirs to carry, forever. So I ask you now, and I want you to sit with this question rather than rush past it. What have you been carrying that you were never meant to keep? Because the answer to that question is more connected to how you age than anything you will ever bow in a bottle, a cream, or a promise printed on a label. And there is something else. Something deeper than release. Something the old monks understood before modern science ever had the language to explain it. And it begins not with what we let go of, but with what we choose to protect. 2. Why peace is the rarest anti-aging secret. We live in a world that sells us the idea that youth is something to be purchased. Creams, procedures, products with promises written in bold letters. And I do not say this to dismiss science. Science has given us many gifts. But I say this because there is a secret that no product can replicate, no matter how expensive, no matter how advanced. That secret is peace. Not the peace of a quiet room, not the peace of a holiday, which fades the moment you return to your life. I mean something deeper, the peace of a mind that is no longer at war with itself. Consider this. Stress is not simply a feeling, it is a chemical event. When the mind lives in a constant state of alarm, worry about tomorrow, replaying yesterday, comparing yourself to everyone around you, the body responds as though it is under threat. It floods itself with the very hormones designed to help you survive a crisis, not live an ordinary Tuesday. And when this happens not for a moment but for years, the body begins to age under that pressure, the way iron rusts faster in a storm than in still air. This is not poetry. This is physiology. Chronic stress has been shown, again and again, to accelerate the very processes that determine how quickly our cells age. The rare individuals who seem to defy time are, more often than we realize, individuals who have found a way to live without that constant internal storm. They are not free of hardship. No one is free of hardship, but they have learned not to let hardship live inside them permanently. I think of the monks who spend their lives in quiet discipline, waking before the sun, moving through their days with unhurried intention. People often look at their simplicity and assume it is about restriction, no excess, no indulgence. But that is not the deepest truth of it. The deepest truth is that they have removed the noise that most of us never even notice we are carrying. And in that silence, something is preserved, not just spiritually, physically. Peace, real peace, is rare precisely because it asks something of us that comfort does not. It asks us to stop needing external things to feel calm. It asks us to make peace with uncertainty, with the parts of our story we cannot rewrite, with people who may never apologize, with outcomes that may never resolve the way we hoped. This is not passive. This is one of the most active, disciplined things a person can do, to choose stillness in a world that constantly pulls you toward agitation. And when a person achieves this, even partially, even imperfectly, it shows, not as a trick of the light, not as a coincidence, but as the natural, visible result of a nervous system that is no longer under siege. So the question becomes not how do I look younger, but how do I create a life where my mind is no longer at war with itself? Because the moment you begin answering that question honestly, you will notice that your face begins to answer it too. But peace alone is not the final peace. There is something even more foundational, something that determines whether the peace you find will last, or whether it will simply be another fragile moment that stress eventually swallows. 3. The stillness of the mind reflects in the body. Let me tell you something that took me many years and many silences to fully understand. The mind and the body are not two separate things having a conversation. They are one continuous thing, wearing two different names. When I say stillness of the mind, I am not describing the absence of thought. Thoughts will always come. This is the nature of a living mind. What I am describing is the absence of struggle against those thoughts. A stormy sea does not become still because the wind stops entirely. It becomes still because something beneath the surface holds steady, no matter what moves above it. This is what a disciplined mind learns to do. It learns to observe the storm without becoming the storm. And here is why this matters so deeply for the very question we began with. A mind in constant turmoil sends constant signals of urgency to the body, tension in the back, muscles, shallow breath, a heart that beats as though danger is always near. Over months and years, this becomes the body's default state. The shoulders rise permanently toward the ears. The brow holds a groove it never fully releases. The breath stays high in the chest, instead of settling low, into the belly, where real calm lives. But a mind that has found stillness sends an entirely different message. Slower breath, looser muscles, a nervous system that knows, at the deepest level, that it is safe, even when circumstances are uncertain. And the body, which is always listening to the mind, whether we realize it or not, begins to reflect that safety back to the world. This is why some people, even in difficult seasons of life, seem to carry themselves with a kind of quiet steadiness that others cannot quite explain. It is not that nothing difficult has touched them. It is that they have trained the space between the difficulty and their reaction to it. And in that space, small as it may seem, An entire life is either aged prematurely or gently preserved. I want you to understand that this stillness is not something you are born with. It is not reserved for monks on a mountain or philosophers in ancient texts. It is a practice. It is built the same way strength is built, slowly, through repetition, through choosing, again and again, not to be swept away by every thought that arrives uninvited. Begin simply. When you feel the pull of anger, or fear, or comparison, pause before you follow it. Breathe low into your belly, not high into your chest. Ask yourself, quietly, is this thought something I need to act on, or something I only need to witness? This single pause, practiced daily, begins to retrain not only your mind, but the body that has been listening to your mind for your entire life. What you are building, when you do this, is not simply a calmer today. You are building the very foundation beneath everything we have spoken of, the release of unnecessary weight, the peace that resists the wear of chronic stress, and now the deep stillness that allows both of these to take root and remain. This is the quiet work. It asks for no audience, no recognition, no proof. It only asks that you return to it, day after day, the way water returns to the lowest point of the land, not by force, but by nature. And when you do, something in you begins to soften that has nothing to do with the passing of years, and everything to do with how you have learned to carry them. 4. How forgiveness erases what stress writes on skin. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be still for a moment before you answer. Is there someone you have not forgiven? Perhaps you have not said it out loud in years. Perhaps you have told yourself the matter is closed, the wound has healed, the story is finished. But the body has a way of knowing what the mind refuses to admit, and unforgiveness, even quiet, even buried, is one of the heaviest things a person can carry, without ever seeming to carry anything at all. I have come to understand forgiveness not as a gift we give to someone else, but as a decision we make for the sake of our own nervous system. When we hold on to anger toward another person, we imagine we are punishing them, but they are, in most cases, living their life untouched by our resentment. It is we who wake with it. It is we who fall asleep replaying it. It is our own body that pays the toll for a debt someone else may not even know they owe. This is not sentiment. This is the same chemistry we spoke of before. Every time the mind returns to an old wound, a betrayal, a cruel word, an injustice that was never made right, the body responds as though the wound is happening now, in this moment, for the first time. The stress response fires again. The cortisol rises again, and over years, this repetition writes itself onto the body, the way water, dripping in the same place for long enough, eventually carves a groove into stone. This is why some people seem to age suddenly after a great betrayal, a painful divorce, a friendship that ended in bitterness. It is not simply grief. It is the body absorbing, again and again, an event the mind has never allowed to end. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I want to be very clear about this, because many people resist forgiveness, thinking it means pretending the harm did not happen, or that the other person deserves peace they have not earned. This is not what I am describing. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is simply the moment you stop paying, with your own body and your own years, for something that is no longer happening to you. It is a private act. No apology is required from the other person. No confrontation is necessary. It happens quietly, inside you. The moment you decide that you would rather be free than be right, that you would rather be at peace than be owed something you may never receive. I have watched people carry grudges for 20, 30 years, and I have watched what those years did to their faces, their posture, the very energy that surrounded them, and I have watched others release something just as painful in a single, quiet decision, and within months, something in them appeared lighter, not because their circumstances changed, but because they stopped reliving the wound daily. So I ask you again, gently this time, who are you still punishing yourself for, by refusing to let them go? The answer to that question may be one of the most important steps you take, not only toward peace, but toward the very vitality we have been speaking of since the beginning. And once that weight begins to lift, something else becomes possible, something that most adults believe they have lost forever, but have not. 5. the childlike spirit that refuses to grow old. Watch a child for a moment. Really watch one. Notice how they move through the world without the constant weight of self-consciousness. They laugh without checking whether laughing is appropriate. They ask questions without fear of appearing foolish. They approach each day as though it might contain something wonderful, because to them, it usually does. Somewhere along the way, most of us lose this. Not suddenly, but slowly. The way a fire does not go out all at once, but dims, log by log, until one day we look up and realize the room has gone cold. We stop being curious and start being cautious. We stop wondering and start worrying. We trade wonder for vigilance, and we call this growing up, as though the two were the same thing. But I want to offer you a different way of seeing this. Growing older and growing old are not the same process. One is simply the passage of time, unavoidable, natural, nothing to resist. The other is a slow surrender of aliveness, and it is far more optional than most people realize. I have known people in their 70s who ask questions like children, genuinely curious, genuinely delighted by a new idea, a new place, a new piece of music. And I have known people in their 30s who have already closed themselves off from wonder, entirely, who move through their days with the weary caution of someone twice their age. The difference between them was never simply time, it was permission, whether or not they allowed themselves to remain interested in being alive. This matters more than it may first appear, because a spirit that remains curious keeps a mind engaged, and a mind that stays engaged keeps a body more willing to move, explore, and adapt. Wonder is not a luxury reserved for the young. It is a discipline, one that requires you to resist the temptation to believe you have already seen everything, learned everything, felt everything worth feeling. I want you to notice, this week, how often you dismiss something new simply because it is unfamiliar. Notice how often you say, quietly to yourself, I already know how this goes, before you have even given it a chance to surprise you. This quiet certainty, this closing of the mind, before the experience has even begun, is one of the surest ways a person grows old, long before their body requires it of them. The remedy is simple, though not always easy. Ask more questions than you answer. Let yourself be amazed by something small, a piece of music, a stranger's kindness, the way light falls across a room in the late afternoon. Approach your own life the way a child approaches an unopened door, not with fear of what might be inside, but with the quiet excitement of finding out. This is not about denying the wisdom that only years can bring. It is about carrying that wisdom alongside wonder, rather than letting one replace the other entirely. And when a person manages to hold both, the depth of experience and the lightness of curiosity, something remarkable happens. They begin to feel and appear unmistakably alive. But even this, on its own, is incomplete. There is one final piece, the quiet foundation beneath everything we have spoken of tonight, and without it, nothing else fully holds. 6. Living in alignment with who you truly are. Here is the truth I have saved for last, because it is the one that ties every other truth together. Much of what ages a person, the weight they carry, the war inside their mind, the grudges they refuse to release, the wonder they have quietly abandoned, comes from the same root. It comes from living a life that does not match who they actually are. Think of the exhaustion that comes, not from hard work, but from pretending. Pretending to agree with people you do not agree with. Pretending to want a life you do not actually want. Wearing, every day, a version of yourself shaped entirely by other people's expectations, until the real version underneath becomes almost a stranger to you. This kind of exhaustion is different from physical tiredness. It settles deeper. It ages a person from the inside, quietly, over years, because the body was never designed to sustain a life built on constant self-betrayal. Alignment, on the other hand, is not about achieving something grand or reinventing your entire life overnight. It is about small, honest choices, made consistently, speaking your actual thoughts instead of the version you think others want to hear, spending your time on what genuinely matters to you, rather than what merely looks impressive to others. Choosing relationships that allow you to be fully yourself, rather than relationships that require a constant, quiet performance. When a person begins living this way, something settles in them that no amount of rest or comfort could ever provide. The mind stops spending its energy managing a false self, and that energy becomes available again, for peace, for creativity, for presence. And the body, always listening, always responding to what the mind carries, begins to reflect this new lightness. This is where everything we have spoken of tonight finally meets. The weight you release, the peace you cultivate, the stillness you build, the forgiveness you offer, the wonder you reclaim. None of these are separate practices. They are all expressions of the same deeper choice, to stop living in resistance to your own life and to start living in agreement with it. You do not need to become someone new to appear and feel younger than your years. You need only return to the person you were before the world asked you to carry so much, before fear asked you to become careful instead of curious, before old wounds asked you to keep paying a debt that was never truly yours. This return is not a destination you arrive at once and finish. It is a practice, gentle and ongoing, like breath itself. Some days you will remember, some days you will forget, and carry more than you need to, and that is simply part of being human. But each time you remember, each time you set something down, forgive something old, ask one more curious question, or choose honesty over performance, you are not fighting time. You are simply returning to yourself. And that, more than anything written on a label or promised in a bottle, is the quiet, choring secret behind a face and a spirit that time struggles to touch.